The office was quiet, almost eerily so, until the sudden crash of glass shattered the morning calm. A masked man stormed in, demanding cash, his voice sharp and threatening, and in that instant, the world seemed to stop for Mark Thompson. Not because he was afraid for himself, he had faced far worse, but because his son, 7-year-old Ethan, was watching from the corner, clutching his little backpack, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Mark's heart froze, but his mind clicked into a clarity he never knew he had. He didn't panic. He didn't yell. He stayed calm, his voice steady, as if nothing could touch him. And what he did next would shock not just the robber, but everyone watching, including the CEO who had built this company from the ground up. Before I continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of human courage, please hit like, share this story, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Lonely Dad Strong Heart. Stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. Mark had been a single dad for 4 years. Life had never been easy. After the sudden death of his wife, he had juggled multiple jobs, long nights, and the relentless responsibilities of raising Ethan alone. He had learned the art of patience and the power of composure because every moment of fear or anger could leave scars on his son's heart. That morning, he had come to work early, hoping to finish reports and get home in time to help Ethan with a school project. Now, the morning had transformed into a nightmare. The robber, a young man barely older than Mark himself, was shaking, desperate, and clearly not hardened by crime. His hands trembled as he waved a small gun, and beads of sweat rolled down his face. The CEO of the company, a stern man named Richard Hale, watched from behind his polished office door, frozen. But Mark approached the man slowly, speaking softly, not with fear, but with understanding. He didn't try to fight or threaten. Instead, he asked the young man why he was doing this, why he had risked everything for a few $100s. His calmness was disarming, like water slowly cooling boiling oil. Mark saw it, the moment the robber's shoulders sagged, the moment fear gave way to something else, shame. He learned that the man's mother was sick, that his debts had piled up, and that he had nowhere to turn. And in that instant, Mark made a choice that most people never would. He didn't call security, he didn't scream, he didn't threaten. Instead, he offered him a seat, a glass of water, and a conversation. He told the man that running from life's problems only makes them heavier, and that there were other ways to fight for survival. As minutes passed, what had been tense and volatile became almost human. The robber's gun lowered slowly, the tremor in his hands steadied, and his eyes, previously filled with panic, flickered with confusion, then relief. Mark even joked softly, enough to make the man crack a nervous smile. Ethan, sitting in the corner, cautiously relaxed, seeing that his father's courage was bigger than any fear. The entire office seemed to hold its breath, watching a single father handle what could have been a tragedy with nothing but empathy and reason. Once the man surrendered peacefully, Mark didn't turn him in immediately. Instead, he called someone who could truly help, a local social worker known for rescuing young men from lives of crime. While waiting for help to arrive, he stayed beside the man, speaking of hope, change, and the power of one right choice. By the time the social worker appeared, the young man was calm, apologetic, and willing to face help rather than punishment. The CEO, Richard Hale, had been silently observing everything. A man who had built empires, made million-dollar deals, and faced countless crises, he had never seen courage like this. He had expected chaos, maybe even tragedy, but what unfolded before him was a lesson in humanity. A single dad had transformed a dangerous, life-threatening situation into an act of redemption. The quiet strength of a father, protecting his son and inspiring a scared young man, left him stunned. Mark returned to his desk, Ethan holding his hand tightly, and for the first time that morning, he allowed himself to breathe. Richard Hale came down, not with anger or reprimand, but with curiosity and respect. He asked Mark to explain how he stayed so composed, how he made choices that seemed impossible under stress. Mark simply smiled, looked at Ethan, and said, "Sometimes, it's not about courage. It's about love. And there's nothing braver than facing fear when someone you love is watching." Days later, the story spread quietly through the office. But for Mark, the real reward wasn't recognition, it was seeing Ethan sleep peacefully that night, knowing that his father's calmness and empathy had saved lives. And then, unexpectedly, the CEO returned with an offer. He wanted Mark to lead a community initiative, teaching young people life skills, conflict resolution, and resilience. The same man who had once worried about losing a few $1,000s now realized that true value wasn't in money, it was in human lives, in second chances, in the quiet strength of ordinary heroes. Mark accepted, not for prestige, not for pay, but because he believed that one small act of understanding could ripple into something greater. And it did. The young man who had attempted the robbery went on to rebuild his life, eventually working in the very program Mark helped establish, mentoring other troubled youths. Mark and Ethan continued their life together, stronger, closer, and more compassionate than ever. Life was still challenging, still filled with hurdles, but the incident had changed something intangible. It proved that even in the darkest moments, calm, love, and empathy could create miracles. Mark wasn't a superhero. He was just a father, a single dad who chose kindness when fear tried to dominate, a man who believed that every life mattered, and a dad who showed his son what true strength looked like. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that courage and kindness can change lives, please like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps spread stories of hope and humanity to others who need it. Before we close, I'd love for you to leave a comment. Tell us about a moment when kindness changed someone's life, just like Mark's did. Your story could inspire someone else today. Because in the end, it's not the money, the fame, or the fear that defines us, it's what we do when the world expects us to crumble. Mark Thompson's calm courage reminds us all. Even a single dad with no superpowers can save a life, change a future, and teach the world a lesson in humanity that even a CEO couldn't ignore. If you want, I can also expand this story into a full 2,000-word script with cinematic visual cues and suspense beats so it's ready to use as a full YouTube narration video for Lonely Dad Strong Heart. It will include slow building tension, emotional pauses, and a professional storytelling flow. Do you want me to do that next?